What's the most impactful thing in the world right now, but no one is talking about it? Story 1. The Balkan Spring. There's been lots of protests against corruption in the Balkan countries that are still going on to this day. Story 2. The most impactful thing no one's talking about is the silent collapse of insect populations. Without bugs, our entire food chain and ecosystems are at risk, and it's happening under our radar. Answer. Years ago, I had moved from Africa to Haiti to Korea to Seattle, and I thought that maybe that the PNW was just a place remarkably free of pestilence, which I'm told it is. PNW is super isolated for a US region, and for years and even now, I'm not quite sure something is just a PN thing, or if things have changed from when I last lived full-time in the US, circa 2005-ish, before moving back after 10 years abroad. Story 3. Glacier loss is happening so fast that 2 billion people relying on meltwater could face food and water shortages. Story 4. Planet's still going to shoot and we're too busy with petty wars, our ego and greed to do anything about it. Having taken down and conquered your neighbor won't equate to much when the crops won't grow, the water is poisonous, and the sun is actively trying to take down you. We've lost the plot. Answer. When I was younger, I used to think humans were amazing, curing diseases, standing on the moon, making instant communication possible across the planet, etc. Now I liken all those achievements to a flower growing on a pile of shoot. As a species, we're horrible to each other, to all other forms of life, and to this planet. We're going to burn it all down so a relative few of us can have yachts and intimacy islands. Story 5. The psychological impact of constant overstimulation. We live in a world where we are bombarded by notifications, breaking news, endless content, and algorithm-driven dopamine hits 247. Our attention spans are shrinking, baseline anxiety is rising, and meaningful focus is becoming rare. It doesn't make headlines like war, climate change, or pandemics, but it underlies all of them. We're slowly losing the ability to sit with discomfort, think deeply, or even be bored because there's always another reel, headline, or distraction ready to fill the gap. The consequences? Burnout, isolation, polarization, and a generation that can't tell the difference between being informed and being overwhelmed. And barely anyone's talking about how dangerous that really is. Answer. I don't use any social media on a regular basis, but Reddit, which isn't entirely a social media, in the same way as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. I have an Instagram which I only use to message 2 family members, and that's all. Anytime I have mentioned this to someone, they are astonished, as if I'm the strange one for not having multiple feeds of endless, hyper-stimulating content that I'm addicted to. Story 6. Declining bug populations will spiral up the food chain and make good, nutritious food extremely expensive and rare, so we'll be eating slop-soylent green soon. Phones have destroyed attention spans, abilities to think critically, and algorithms feed you only information you already agree with. Our grip on reality is slipping fast. Women are things again. Intimacy sells, and 18-year-olds are promoting their OnlyFans with captions like, "When my dad finds out about my bad grades while bouncing in front of the camera, they're jerk just out of frame. Kids are looking, adults are paying, celebrity." And objectification are about the same now. Social alignment is breaking down in the West, particularly EU. Parallel societies and legal systems are rising, crime is exploding, and countries are buckling under unprecedented pressure while terrified of defining themselves for fear of being mislabeled. Wealth is rapidly concentrating in the hands of a few. AI and tech are increasingly making jobs obsolete, which is going to widen the gap even further. AI is making it harder and harder to determine what is real. Neat. Story 7. I think one of the biggest problems right now, which is hardly talked about, is the rapid decline in clean drinking water in the world. This could cause serious social and economic crises, but it doesn't get enough attention. Story 8. The fact that huge numbers of businesses are handing confidential information to data harvesters via ChatGPT. Story 9. China is building bullet trains in countries in Africa. There is a growing relationship between Africa and China. Answer. I do some work in an African country that is extremely difficult to get into. The visa process is insane. Tourism is not allowed. Over about a year and a half, I watched this giant hotel get built all by Chinese labor, full-on resort style with a casino, rooftop restaurant, giant indoor pool, spa, etc. It opened recently, and I went for a tour. Everything was done as cheap as humanly possible, so much so that I questioned the structural integrity of the building. The food they served was the worst meal I have ever had in my entire life. Not kidding. I guarantee you that there is some accountant in China who is reporting that every night that hotel is booked solid and the casino is losing money. And if someone ever decides to come audit that business, visa denied. All while the local government takes a cut from the money laundering. I've never seen anything like it. Story 10. Honestly, how fast we're losing basic social skills because everything's digital now. People can't make eye contact, have real conversations, or handle any conflict face to face. We're all just staring at screens and wondering why we feel disconnected. It's happening so gradually that we don't even notice how much we've changed. Answer. The people entering the workforce now are the first generation to have lived their whole life with a smartphone, social media, and there's definitely a noticeable difference. The most obvious one I see is public speaking and presentations. I'm not even talking about in front of a crowd. I mean, just sitting in a boardroom with 5 people and having to talk for a few minutes. When they learn that's what they have to do tomorrow, you can see absolute panic wash over them. You then get a 10-minute presentation of jumbled and disjointed thoughts spit out at you with no structure whatsoever. Another issue I'd add is people being addicted to their phones. I've seen grown adults be told by their boss to go lock their phone in their car because they can't stop themselves from looking at it every 90 seconds. These are usually the same people that spend half an hour in the bathroom every day thinking no one knows they're in there playing on their phone. Story 11. The global destruction of democracies as a result of troll farms and misinformation campaigns. This, paired with ever-evolving realistic AI, is a hyper-threat to modern free civilization emo. Story 12. For 49 years running, the reigning champion is the 1976 United States Supreme Court decision Buckley v. Valeo, which is the basis for a number of campaign finance laws, including Citizens United, that have essentially legalized bribery in what is the biggest economic powerhouse in the modern world. You can look at nearly any issue and trace direct lines from campaign contributions, by moneyed interest to lawmakers, and then from those lawmakers to the legislation they push. You might say that the environmental collapse is more important and pressing than something as boring as campaign finance. Laws. For the most part, you're right, except a majority of politicians are basically paid through super PACs, astroturfed campaigns, swanky jobs for their fail-sons, paid speaking engagements, bonuses upon retirement from office, etc., etc. And the average citizen has little or no influence by comparison. So, if a company thinks they'll save more backing an elected official who will deregulate them than they will abiding environmental standards, they'll do it. Want to end the various global conflicts going on right now? Raytheon sure doesn't. Nor does Boeing. Hell, Elon Musk basically just outright admitted to buying Trump the election when he had his most recent Twitter meltdown. Buckley versus Vallejo turned this entire country, and in effect, the whole capitalist world, into a pay-to-win extraction shooter. Story 13. Climate strange. It's who the climate will date after it divorces us. Algae? Brain-eating amoebas? Kinky. Story 14. If anyone says anything other than we have bioengineered the planet into a mass human tragic end machine that will also take countless animal lives too, they have lost the plot. Story 15. How deep fake tech is evolving. It's scary how real it looks, and no one's really ready for what's coming. Story 16. AI. Wait, stop. Before you say, but everyone is talking about AI? No, everyone is talking about goddamn chatbots and image generators. That's just one tiny area of the AI, which, really, is machine learning sector. The real good shoot is coming now. First off, if we stick with things like LLMs, the chatbots, these are now increasingly trained not to provide information directly, but to instead search or automate tasks that you can't purely 11 logic your way out of. This means a huge quality of life type lift is coming over the next 3 to 5 years in terms of IT. But second, and much more interesting, is how AI models are trained to create or test various medicines, scientific theories, find molecules, test proteins, and so forth. Scientists have already used AI to test data that would have taken human researchers several hundred years to do themselves, and it did it in a few weeks. Stuff like this is going to explode, in the good way, so many scientific fields. Machine learning is being used to try to understand animals as well. We're essentially trying to learn dolphin right now, and we've already used it to identify several key sounds among pigs. Like, really, we're learning to speak to animals with this tech. AI is just a much, much, much wider field of research than 95% of people understand. Answer: I have long disregarded AI as something that will not impact me. Recently, my wife showed me some logs of hers with ChatGPT. We've been having some trouble with Mom, and she's used ChatGPT both as a counselor, and she asked it to help out with a potential restraining order. Not only was it an amazing counselor, I don't have to sit in a room for an hour. I can talk to it, do something else, come back an hour later and continue. But it took her texts and voicemails and wrote a document with justification for why we would need a restraining order. It did it all. I looked at that and thought, I better retire sooner than later. Story 17. As much as AI is maligned for making shoot term papers for lazy students and creepy-looking art, it is making a huge impact in science, particularly biology. Take, for example, protein folding. Proteins are comprised of various amino acid chains, and we've known what amino acids are in them for a very long time, maybe a century or so. But the key that makes a protein work is the 3D shape of the protein, the twists, folds, and arrangement of the amino acids. In the past 50 years, scientists have painstakingly figured out the folding of about 125,000 proteins using X-rays and various other methods to get a rough idea of what the shape is, and then slowly fill in the gaps with the right aminos and positions. It's a slow and intense process. Computers started helping in about the 1980s, and the process got faster, maybe 10x. But with AI, in just a couple of years, 220 million protein structure predictions have been calculated. Now it's not perfect. The algorithms struggle with some of the more complex proteins, and the learning model doesn't always know all the constraints around each protein, like if it needs to exist in an environment with salt or metal ions. But it's made a gigantic leap forward. Using AI brought a logarithmic enhancement to the process. and it's huge for biological science, especially medicine. Misfolded proteins are involved in things like Parkinson's, mad cow disease, Alzheimer's, aging, mutations, etc. Having a huge understanding of proteins means we're going to see more effective vaccines, medicines, and treatments for a variety of health issues affecting humans and animals. It's a lot like what we saw from the DNA mapping projects of the late 90s, early 2000s. It was slow at first, but picked up steam rapidly as the data became more and more precise, and scientists started utilizing it effectively. Answer: I agree that AI has value beyond crappy term papers. My brother had amyloidosis, a misfolded protein disease. So little is known about the disease that, rather predictably, he went to a multitude of doctors for years before getting a diagnosis. Due to AI, rapid advances have been made in at least the diagnosis of such, compared to when he was diagnosed 10 years ago. Story 18. One or two entire generations who are numb by scrolling social media on smartphones using AI to do their homework. We will have a clueless bunch of people who cannot think for themselves and have the attention span of a fly. The future will be great. Story 19. The North Pole has possible rare minerals, and the countries closest are trying to get their own slice. We abuse all resources with a vulgarity that makes no sense in the long run. Be it sand, water, coal, plastics, oil, blood diamonds, yeah. Story 20. Smartphones. We treat them like tools, but they've quietly reshaped everything. Our attention spans, our social behavior, even how we perceive ourselves and others. No one wants to talk about how much damage they're doing. Our ability to focus is very short now. We've become addicted to instant gratification, dopamine loops, and endless scrolling. People are more isolated than ever while being connected. 247. Adult content addiction, mindless content consumption, cyberbullying, etc. It's all normalized now. We're living in an attention economy, and smartphones are the gateway substances. It's not just tech anymore. It's rewiring human behavior. And somehow, we're all just fine with it. Answer: is it smartphones or the hyper-commercialism that has taken them over? Before advertisers got their hands on literally everything, there was more of a joy in learning and discovering new things on the internet, and by extension smartphones, which allowed us to make the internet portable. Now that we've reached the critical mass of enshittification and advertising hell, there's more of an incentive to please the algorithm and get content pushed as far out as possible for the sake of monetization. The influencer voice and instant gratification loop are used to sell product, or in this case, views. Story 21. The US can't produce plutonium pits anymore, and China is tripling, perhaps quadrupling their nuclear stockpile by 2030. Story 22. Mainstream media and journalism in general do not represent regular people. Indeed, workers doing normal jobs are outliers treated like aliens. Watch the interviews with Zohran Mamdani. Their focus is on impacts to millionaire and billionaires, and talk about free buses like it's the end of democracy. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Story 23. The fact that in about 20-30 years, electrical grids will start failing during heat waves, even in modern wealthier areas. There is no fix or solution that doesn't cost billions of dollars and take decades to finish. Story 24. There is a real chance Russia will experience a rapid, unscheduled disassembly. There is no way to predict what form that will take and what a nation armed with thousands of nuclear weapons will do in the midst of its dying breaths. Putin has committed unspeakable crimes and knows that only his command of Russian nuclear forces is keeping him from a painful passing. The second and third order impacts of a rapid unscheduled disassembly of Russia are almost impossible to calculate, but the big ones include China seizing Vladivostok and the area around it, Japan seizing Sakhalin, Lithuania-Poland seizing Kaliningrad, Finland reclaiming territory lose in the Winter War, collapse of the governments in Belarus, Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. Answer: there is no way to predict what form that will take and what a nation armed with thousands of nuclear weapons will do in the midst of its dying breaths. First time. They might see a few more states fracture away, but other nations will respect the current UN-recognized borders, so as to not piss off both the UN as well as the nuclear-armed successor state. The primary issue with annexing territories is that you're also getting a hostile population alongside it, the same reason why nobody wanted Kaliningrad in the first place. The only way to deal with that is to displace the original population and colonize it with your own, which will turn you into a pariah state, as ethnic cleansing is rather frowned upon, which most countries can't deal with unless they're already on the UN Security Council. As for puppet governments falling to revolts, that probably will happen unless they can find a new overseer, but those things stabilize themselves eventually. It's happened many times before and will happen many times again. Story 25. Remember when all the scientists were freaking out about global warming, ultimately resulting in 196 parties adopting the 2015 Paris Agreement to keep temps under 1.5 C of rise over the next 100 years? We didn't make it a year before the first month averaged 1.5 C. We didn't make it a decade before the first year averaged 1.5 C, Feb 23 John 24 WAS. The most recent data, April 2025, indicates 21 of the past 22 months have been over 1.5 C, with the preceding year, May 2024, April 2025, at 1.58 C. Glaciers are melting, seas are rising, corals are bleached, storms are increasing in intensity. Everything they warned about is already happening. Story 26. Population collapse in the first world. Our birth rates are plummeting and nobody seems A, concerned about it, or B, has the first idea what to do about it. This is something that will destroy the West far quicker than any other existentialist threat. Story 27. AI and robotics are developing faster than we can even comprehend, and the ILFE, will change in the next 1 to 3 years. I think the entire economic landscape will be questioned, and we may see the end of wages. Story 28. Crypto in the finance space. We have a huge white-collar problem with failing to deliver billions of dollars worth of trades weekly. The better we manage these leech slime balls, the more money we will all have. Story 29. The Holocene extinction, aka the 6th extinction event, which is the ongoing rapid loss of biodiversity primarily driven by human activities. Story 30. Global warming. It should be treated as a world-class emergency, but nobody says or does anything. In less than a handful of years at most, the vast majority of Earth's population will be hit by severe water stress and food scarcity, as well as the resulting societal and economic collapse. Yet, the average person seems to be totally oblivious of what's happening, in spite of it being blatantly and painfully evident. Makes me absolutely postal. We as a species need to slow the fudge down, and we need to do it yesterday, 'cause tomorrow will be too late already. Story 31. Rise of fascism, bad news for rights of women and of LGBT, and people with some ethnic origins and people with some religions, and of people with a disability, and of financial vulnerable people, and our whole future calls against diplomatic exchanges for peace and against ecological planification, TLDR, they can uck us all pretty fast. Diversity unite and get involved. Through 3. Story 32. Honestly, the collapse of insect populations. Nobody gives a darn until their grocery bill triples, and farmers can't grow squat without pollinators or pest control from nature. Used to drive in the summer and have to scrub my windshield every other day because it was caked in bugs. Now, nothing. It's dead silent out there, and not in a good way. People laugh it off like good. I dislike bugs, but if the bugs go, we're next. No bees, no crops, no beetles, no soil, no food chain, no stability. It's already started, and no one's really paying attention. Story 33. I think with AI, as others have mentioned here, the end of wages is for the first time in humanity in sight. With so many jobs being replaced, having wages will be unsustainable anymore. The point of AI is to replace and automate mundane tasks. And since 90% of worldwide jobs are mundane and repetitive, it'll be a short while before all this is replaced. Most, if not all people, will lose their jobs someday. Answer: that's the weird thing to me. Most jobs aren't that useful. If you aren't doing something that helps feed, house, clothe, heal, transport, or provide people electricity or heat, your job isn't really useful in a practical sense. And that's the vast majority of jobs. And since the value of money isn't really tied to anything actually productive or useful, that means our economic system is pretty much made up bullshit. And it's criminal and grossly incompetent that our leaders are not working to more equitably distribute resources. Story 34. Statistically, most authoritarian governments fail when you can get 3.54 of the population to go on strike and take to the streets. The people are not powerless. Pass it on. Story 35. The fact there is a genocide going on in Gaza and Western media wants to silence a couple of shouty-mouthed rap groups. Answer: I think OP was interested in real things, not fairy tales. In war, sadly, there are people that are not combatants that get hurt, especially if the combatants terrorists that started this and keep it running actively hide among non-combatants and try actively to maximize civilian casualties on both sides. But although the massive efforts all those terrorists doing to maximize non-combatants' deaths, Israel is mostly not falling in the trap, and the number of dead is not high as what the terrorists wants. If it was a genocide, first, there was proof. Second, the numbers were on the high. Hundreds, thousands, if not even more than 1 million deaths. The terrorists did not build protection shelters for their people. The terrorists are not protecting their people. Gaza is smaller than some cities of the world. It is not a vast, huge area. There are places to hide civilians in. If a modern army was actively targeting civilians, the passing toll was totally mind-boggling. And even maybe there was no one left there after almost 2 years of war. Luckily, Israel targets the terrorists and not the civilians. Also, don't lose hope. I'm sure these terrorists will be dealt with soon and real. Peace will be achieved for the benefit of civilians on both sides. Story 36. Mother Nature, I've given you everything. Humanity. Cool, let's fight over imaginary lines on a map. Story 37. Chatbots are actively fooling ignorant people into giving away their rights and freedoms to people who don't know or give a shoot about their existence. Story 38. The collapse of stare decisis in Supreme Court jurisprudence. This is a precursor to autocratic takeover. The court majority is not only politically driven, but is making decisions that clearly do not contemplate a transition of power. Story 39. Lack of kindness, integrity. Conservatives aren't focusing on right values to conserve. All they care about is controlling women for some reason. Story 40. Climate collapse war in Europe, Africa, Middle East, almost exponentially increasing income inequality, neo-fascist resurgence. Story 41. Overpopulation? The overshoot day? Like, hello, we're currently consuming so much resources we would need 2 or 3 Earth for it to be sustainable? And nobody gives a flying fudge and people keep popping out kids? Story 42. Mental health crisis among teens, especially boys, in the age of social media. Social media is rewiring self-esteem. Loneliness, anxiety, and tragic end rates are breaking records, but almost no one is talking about it seriously. Story 43. The rapid rise of AI. Much of it will be beneficial, but much of it will be harmful. Particularly the parts involving us determining what is real and what is fabricated as the technology improves. As with any technology, economies and jobs are threatened, and new economies and jobs may arise. But the speed this change happens at will be much, much faster than in the past. Faster than the climate change crisis for sure. Story 44. On a positive note, CRISPR. It really has the ability to save billions of lives. Alternatively, it could also be abused. It is a technology that, second to nuclear, could have the most significant impact on humanity in the future. Story 45. The unevenness of the progress the world is about to experience, fusion, AI, etc. It's not gonna happen in poor countries. Very real risk of the world permanently splitting in an even more dramatic fashion than the current global North-South. Story 46. Ecological problems. People don't try to solve the problem because it would cost them money and they profit more. Things that hurt nature. Story 47. I could be totally off the mark and it may just miss, but